Okay, prediction time. We're going to be doing predictions for Playday number 1 of stage number 2 of the NAL 2022 season. So a new stage is starting up in just 3 days. Today's the 11th of June. This will start up on the 14th. And I think that week, the week of the 14th, which is this coming week, is the week all of the leagues start. They all start between like the 14th and the 20th, but it is NAL that is returning first. So the matches for that day are going to be Dark Zero versus Beast Coast, TSM versus Mirage, XSET versus Space Station, Astralis versus Sonics, Oxygen versus Parabellum. So I'm going to go down the line. We'll do them in order, of course. No reason not to. Maybe this is a little bit early to do predictions. I mean, well, 3 days in advance, not that crazy. I usually do it like the day before, but I don't see any significant difference. We'll just get them done now. So Dark Zero versus Beast Coast. There are a lot of reasons to pick Dark Zero. On paper, they are the pretty heavy favorite, I suppose. They won last time they played each other, but that was an 8-7 victory. Do keep in mind, it was super close, but Dark Zero did take it. And I mean, I suppose maybe the biggest factor in a lot of people's minds, they are the reigning major champions. But there are a lot of factors to consider, and when coming back to NAL, maybe it's not even a strict advantage to just have won the major. So 6 of these teams here, and you'll notice none of the teams that went to the major are playing against each other. So it's the top 4 teams versus 5th through 8th teams, and then the 9th and 10th teams, TSM and Mirage, are playing against each other. But yeah, so 4 of the teams went to the major, and then 2 of the other teams, and that is Space Station and Parabellum, they have VOD on them. They both played in the Gamers Without Borders qualifier thing, and so that's pretty recent. That is a qualifier for a big tournament that has a lot of money on the line, so probably they weren't pulling too many punches, if any. So pretty useful VOD, very recent VOD on them, and then also the teams at the major. So for that reason, Beast Coast has maybe sort of a strategic advantage over Dark Zero. Also take into account the fact that maybe Dark Zero are a little burnt out. Maybe motivation is going to be a little bit low. They just won that. They just lifted that trophy, got a bunch of money, finally got a title for some of the players. And now they got to come back to the NAL and play some best of ones. It's not nearly as prestigious. And of course, it is NAL that qualifies you for the next major. But I think just any given best of one, especially at the very beginning, maybe feels a little bit small time. You can probably just lose a few games and still go to the major. But it will, of course, hurt you. But you can do it. So motivation issues could be a factor. Maybe they won't be a factor. I don't know. I can't delve too deeply into the psyches of these players. But I think especially, a little bit of burnout, and then also the fact that Beast Coast has way more intel on Dark Zero than vice versa. So there are reasons to pick Beast Coast, but I think I'm going to go with the safe-seeming option of Dark Zero. But if you're like wagering Twitch points or whatever, if it's massively in Dark Zero's favor, I'd probably put my points on Beast Coast. If it's like 80 or 90% in their favor, I feel like Beast Coast have a higher chance than that to win, and you could get away with a little bit of a point heist. So we'll move on to the next one, TSM versus Mirage. So also on paper, it seems like TSM should take this. They are the reigning world champions, not to be confused with the reigning major champions of Dark Zero. But they did lose to Mirage last time that they played. Doesn't seem like it's going to be a fluke that will be repeated. TSM, it seemed like they should be ready to make the comeback. They had an awful stage last stage, and they seem like a good enough team where they shouldn't repeat it. It's strange that it was so bad last stage, but maybe that it got to a certain point where they're like, all right, we're just gonna kind of tee it in and try again next stage. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I imagine TSM have to take this, especially considering Mirage has a couple of roster changes, so they're probably still solidifying a lot of stuff. They might even be trying out some stuff early on, like they might play a little bit more crazy, which might work to their advantage, but it also might not. It's not like TSM is exactly going to get fragged out of the server. Or at least it's not very likely. So yeah, I'll go TSM. And moving on, XSET versus Space Station. So I feel like the third and the fourth games are the two more tough ones to call. The last time that these two teams met, it was a heavy Space Station win, a 7-3 victory, but that was all the way back in Playday number 1 of the last stage. So it was some 3 months ago, and XSET have seemingly improved a ton since then. They improved seemingly a ton just after the very first week. So they lost to Space Station, and then they lost to TSM 3-7, and then they went on a 5-game win streak, and then they lost the last 2 games, but they were pretty close overtime games. And then they went to the major, and they made the playoffs, and they did maybe fall a little bit short, but still they did lose to one of the teams that went on to make the grand final. And part of the reason they lost might have been because their coach couldn't help them out during the game, and that's still true. Bodega still, I guess, is banned, right? So he won't be helping them out on stage. I imagine they'll have somebody else, but maybe they won't be quite as effective as Bodega. We'll have to see. And Space Station, they should, in theory, be back on the come-up. They were up for quite a long time, at least in the region, especially in stages 2 and 3. And just missing out on the major, especially in the fashion that they did, I'm sure they are ready to not allow that to happen. They want to lock in as many points as they can, as quickly as they can, and that starts with XSET here. So yeah, maybe a little bit of a fall off from XSET. They had a little bit of a meteoric rise coming from, well, nothing. They formed as a team, and then they made top 4. They went to the major, made it to playoffs, and then fell in the playoffs. But still, exceeding everyone's expectations, and Space Station probably falling below everyone's expectations by not making the major. So yeah, I'm gonna pick Space Station. I think a little bit of bias there, but it is what it is. I also think that they have a perfectly good shot. Like, maybe this is about 50-50. Maybe even it's Space Station advantage, depending on how good you thought they looked in the Gamers Without Borders tournament. But yeah, also XSET could take it. They were really, really good in every game except for the first 2 games, and they just happened to play Space Station in one of those 2 games. So maybe it'll be XSET, but I'm going to go with Space Station. And then Astralis versus Sonics, perhaps the game of the day, a little bit of a rivalry here. This is also a rematch from the very first day of last stage, and Astralis crushed Sonics, and Sonics just had a really bad stage last stage. They did bounce back a bit in the latter half, in like the last 4 games. In Playdays, I guess it'd be 6 and 7. They had close-ish games against Dark Zero and Oxygen. They didn't go to overtime or anything, but they got 4 rounds and 5 rounds. And so, they got close to overtime, and those were 2 of the teams that went to the major. And then they did win their last 2 against, who did they play against? Was it TSM and whoever it was? I'll probably have it on screen. They got victories in the last 2 days. The very last one was against TSM. And so they ended the stage well. They made sure they didn't end up in the very bottom. But they did have a really bad stage, and Astralis had an incredible stage, and then Astralis went on to the major, and then they almost won the major. They went to the grand final, and they were 1 map away. Yeah, this and this and this and that and whatever. A bunch of reasons to pick Astralis, but kind of like what I said for Dark Zero versus Beast Coast, there is a ton of VOD on Astralis. They made it all the way to the grand final. Sonics, there is no VOD on them post stage number 1, so they have had time off to relax and, well, to probably get their strategies in order, get prepared for any other team, and probably Astralis more so than anyone. The fact that they were so dominant puts a very large target on their backs, and then I don't recall exactly when this the schedule was put out, what day it was, but it was like a week or maybe even more than a week ago. So they've had all of that time in which they were fully aware that Astralis would be their very first opponent. Maybe even before that. I don't know if the teams have any information about who their first opponents will be before the public actually knows the schedule. So yeah, I think even though on paper Astralis heavy favorites, there are a bunch of reasons to pick Sonics, and I'm going to pick Sonics. I think it's a little bit of an underdog pick because, again, Astralis, one of the most dominant teams in the world within their region, and obviously by far the most dominant team in NA for stage number 1, only taking the 1 loss, make it to the grand final of the major. But I think it is time for Sonics to bounce back. It's kind of like the TSM situation, but one's playing Mirage and one's playing Astralis. The 10th place team versus the first place team, but I'm gonna go Sonics. I think a little bit of a niche pick. They in the past were really, really good against Astralis, and I think maybe they just fumbled the bag a little bit. I guess you'd say maybe even they weren't fully ready for the stage because they did pretty poorly in the following several playdays. But I think the map had a lot to do with it. Probably if they played a different map, they wouldn't have got crushed so hard. They probably would have lost. Astralis was quite good, but a 1-7 loss probably wouldn't have happened on another map. So maybe they underestimated their opponent on the map. They overestimated themselves. They'll probably go to a better map and should be much, much more ready for their opponents here and also for the stage in general. I'm going to go with Sonics. Oxygen versus Parabellum, final game of the day, and I said it's pretty easy to pick. Going to go with Oxygen, but Parabellum I do think has a lot of upset potential here. They almost beat Oxygen last time they played. It was a 6-3. They were up 6-3 on Oxygen, and then Oxygen ran back 5 rounds in a row on them, so they definitely let it slip through their fingers. A good amount of perseverance from Oxygen. I think Newers was getting destroyed, and then he really popped off in those last 5 rounds to secure the win for Oxygen. And so maybe something similar can happen, and maybe Parabellum will actually close it out this time. But 2 new players coming onto Parabellum, even though they look quite promising, looks like they should work out quite well. Maybe not in the very first day, and maybe not against an opponent as fearsome as Oxygen on that very first day. I think Oxygen should, in theory, be able to take advantage of any sort of disorder Parabellum has. Maybe they'll be trying to figure things out still. Probably they will. They haven't been formed for that long, but I think most reasons to pick Oxygen, and then even they did make it quite far in the major, but Parabellum is one of those teams that played in Gamers Without Borders, so there is VOD on them. So yeah, just a ton of reasons. I think Oxygen is the easy pick here. And if I had to do a lock-in, it would probably be this one or maybe TSM versus Mirage. I don't know which one I'd actually go with because I don't actually have to do it. But if I did, it'd be certainly one of those two. So those are going to be my predictions. So one more time, that is Dark Zero over Beast Coast, TSM over Mirage, Space Station over XSET, Sonics over Astralis, and Oxygen over Parabellum. I feel pretty good about the predictions. Again, these two really feel like they could go either way. And maybe this one is the boldest one of mine, but maybe I'll get a little bit more bold this stage. I think it was like super safe last stage, and it worked out fairly well for me. But let's see what happens. Yeah, if you have your own predictions, let me know. If you have any comments about any of the predictions I made, you could also let me know. And other than that, a like and a comment, or a like and a subscription, I suppose, are quite appreciated. And with all of that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video.